Yes, yes. That music has us flowing into the weekend. And today I'm very excited because we are going to be talking about another thing that is flowing from taps in Connecticut. We are here with members of the New Haven Pride Center, artivist Juan Carlos Soto, who also works at the Pride Center. So I feel like, Juan Carlos, you wear many, many hats. And Taylor Willett of Alvarium. Am I saying that right?
Yep. Yeah. Alvarium.
Okay, great.
Got it.
Alvarium Brewing Company. And we are going to be talking about many things, including a recent collab that has resulted in a beer called Be Fierce. I say B because it's not just BE, it's BEE, like the little things that fly around and terrify people in the summertime. And we are also going to be talking about one of my favorite things, which is smashing the patriarchy in brewing, because this is a very white, cisgender, and male and heterosexual space. And Taylor, I'm excited to talk about smashing that. Yeah. So I want to hop right in and talk about where the inspiration from Be Fierce came from.
So I reached out to New Haven Pride Center and got to work with these two amazing individuals, Patrick and JC. Basically, my kind of pseudo role at Alvarium Beer Company is like community outreach / making sure that our space is a space that's accessible for everybody, not just the white guy with a beard and a flannel. So I've done collabs similar to this before. I did one in November of last year that was donated to the ACLU in Hartford, making sure that people who had faced racial injustice were getting the help that they needed. So with this collab, we reached out and we said, hey, we want to do a beer for Pride Month, but we want to do a beer for Pride Month all the time, So we're going to be brewing this one again. JC did the label; it was awesome. It was just, we wanted to make sure that everybody knew that they could be a part of something.
And I want to say we're really lucky in Connecticut because we get 2 Pride Months. This is something I found out when I moved to the state, and I'm very excited. So we have Pride Month in June with everyone else and their cousins. And then we get Pride Month again in September. And Patrick, I'm wondering, so Patrick Dunn is the executive director of the New Haven Pride Center. I did an extremely
And I'm wearing my Alvarium.
Yes, yes, amazing. I feel like I'm gonna order one of those as soon as the show is over.
And it benefits the New Haven Pride Center if you get the purple
Yes. Oh, amazing. So I'm wondering, Patrick, if you can talk a little bit about why Connecticut has 2 Pride Months, because I will say, as a writer who runs a publication, I get that question from readers like a couple times a year.
Well, there's a lot of myths around why. The understanding that I have come to from the many myths of deciphering truth from myth is really twofold, 2 reasons. One is Connecticut, its proximity to places Boston, Rhode Island, New York, which have typically all had their big events in June. 20 years ago when Connecticut was curating its first Pride event, which was because Connecticut originally had one event called Connecticut Pride, and it would take place in Hartford, New Haven, and somewhere else, usually somewhere in Fairfield, but sometimes out in New London. And when they were trying to figure out when to do it, they were like, well, maybe we shouldn't do it in June, because like if New York is one week and then the following week is Rhode Island, like nobody's gonna come. And so they decided to do it in September. And then the other reason that I've come to understand that a lot of the reasons why they picked September versus like July was Connecticut has a huge student population, especially in our bigger cities. And the idea was like, oh, we want to do this when the students are here, because if we do this in like July or August, we're leaving out a big chunk of our community that lives with us, 9 months out of the year. So that's how we ended up with the original Connecticut Pride being in September. The original Connecticut Pride, if I remember correctly from my Connecticut queer history, was on the second weekend of September, which is now when Hartford Pride Fest is. And the original Pride, like I said, had all of these cities kind of working together. And one year somebody wanted the Saturday and somebody else didn't want to give it up. And so they were like, we're leaving. And it became broken to pieces. And then that's how we ended up with the 169 Pride events that we now have in Connecticut between May and September every year.
Amazing. And when you first heard from Alvarium, what did you, because I know, Patrick, that you have been steadily growing the Pride Center's footprint since your tenure began, which was in August 2017. And, when they reached out, what was your, I imagine you said yes, maybe with a few expletives that we can't share because we're monitored by the FCC. Yeah, but what was your reaction? And yeah.
Well, so it's so funny. So also, by the way, Lucy, I think today is actually the 4-year anniversary of the article you did profiling me coming to the Pride Center, because it popped up on my memory this morning.
That means that one of us is old, but we're not going to talk about that.
We're not going to talk about that. I think it's my boyfriend Kyle, because he's turning 31 on Monday. But no, it was so funny because the email originally came to Maya, who does our marketing and development work. And it originally came to her, and she kind of turned at her desk and was like, so we got this like weird email and I don't know if it's real. And I was like, and she's like, I think they want to do a beer with us and give us some of the money, but I'm confused and I don't know. And like, is that even something we want to do? And I was like, just email me, copy, email back and copy me. And then I was like, yes, we do. This sounds so much fun. I have always been, and I will always be, and the Pride Center will always be a place that was built $1 at a time at drag shows, by small donations, by partnerships with community organizations, and partnership with folks in the community that care to promote the center, support the center, develop the center, maybe while also developing their own brands, but in a way that's like equitable for everybody involved. And like, I can't say, like, there's all kinds of weird like partnerships you get into when you work in a nonprofit, and like half the times they don't work for anybody, but you just kind of keep doing them. And like, that wasn't how it was with Alvarium. Like, it literally, it was been such a pleasure. And I will say, I was like a little nervous because like the brewing industry to me, it's like what you say, it's like, I think of it as this like bro-y, and I'm like, ooh. Here comes like the drag queen with the rainbow flag. But it was, it was a really cool experience. And like I said, I say this all the time, like the center is always open to and excited to have new conversations, explore new opportunities to work together. And we'll work with pretty much anybody as long as they're not bringing like racism and that kind of stuff to the table.
Yeah. Juan Carlos, I want to pull you in and talk about the design, which, Taylor, do you have a can actually? This design is fabulous. It's beautiful. And JC, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Yeah. So JC, I want to talk to you about the design and how this fits into a lot of the artwork that you've actually been putting out and blessing us with on sort of social media channels and in the public realm. So when you heard about this collab, did you start storyboarding, or did you have like, boom, the image?
I don't know. I think sometimes like when I get into that creative space, I just sort of like leave my body a little bit. It sounds really cliche, but it sort of happens. I think it started with the name. Taylor gave me the name, and we talked about colors. And then from there, I kind of thought about like, when I hear the word Be Fierce, like who do I think about? Like what comes to mind? And instantly like Bubbles came to my mind, like this amazing, Black drag queen, trans woman, and sort of like that is the image, Black and brown trans women and drag queens who were smashing the patriarchy. And it was a bit of like that, and also like wanting to bring some of my art. And typically when I draw, I like to draw a lot of like women, and specifically women of color, because often when we look at art, those are the people that are missing. So I like to bring them in, and I don't know, it was, I think I did like a couple of sketches and I sent them to Patrick and Laura, and it was like, what do you think? You like this, you like that?
At 1 a.m, by the way.
The same day that I gave him the project.
That is when some people do their best. I'm just saying.
And I have to, I have to say, I was like really excited. So I graduated from art school and I really wanted to go into like product and packaging design. And, obviously when I think, folks know that like when I left art school, I kind of looked around and I was like, oh my gosh, the world is on fire. Like I have to do something about it. And sort of my life took a different turn, but that want never left, right? So when this opportunity came, it was so exciting for me to do it. And also, kind of like the conversation we were having, like when you think about beer and sort of like that, right? Like thinking about some of the marketing that happens, it's always like, like sexy women holding cans and being like, drink this, right? So I had the opportunity to, in a way, sort of be like, no, 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 we're going to change the story. We're going to change how we look at this. And I think what a perfect way to put like a fierce drag queen on a beer can and just, I don't know. So I was so excited. I'm pretty sure I slept like 2 or 3 hours the following couple of days because I was so excited to get it done. But yeah, so I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be able to illustrate and put my art and who I believe is fierce and amazing sort of archetype of human being on something that is often so contrasting to those people.
Yeah. And I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, so now we're in July, but we were just in June and this beer was released during June and we just passed the 52nd anniversary of the Stonewall riots. So according to Hollywood, white gay men, young, very attractive white gay men started the Stonewall riots. That's in a 2015 trash film that you should not see. But of course, we know that it was Marsha P. Johnson who people owe a very great debt to. And 3 years before that, it was a group of trans women in California in the Tenderloin district at Compton's Cafeteria. And so Patrick or JC, I'm wondering if you could just really quickly give listeners a teachable moment, because I feel like the history of Black and brown trans women in the history of protest, in the legacy of protest, including what we are seeing now in New Haven streets, is just something that people cannot talk about enough.
JC, do you want me to go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you can add stuff to it, but one of the things that I want to say, like just in general, like Black and brown queer women have been leading movements for social justice, right? Like our own Black Lives New Haven is led by Black queer women, right? Like, so we owe so much to them, just in just regular life, right? Beyond Pride, like in Pride, yes, like Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, Stormy, like all these folks, who are amazing and wonderful, but also like beyond that, like they're constantly, I remember like a while back, not to get super political, but like a while back when the elections in I think it was Alabama, where that guy who was running had some stuff with like some really inappropriate relationships with underage women, and there was like Black women who turn out in like large numbers, and everybody was like, oh my gosh, thank you Black women for saving us. Like, oh, this is not the first time they've done this. They've been doing this for all the time, but also they shouldn't have to do this. But also thank you for always having the back of the right thing, right? And always like coming in and saving us. But in terms of Pride, yeah, like we owe so much to people like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera and countless others who either we don't remember or got like erased from history on purpose, right? Like that's something that also happens.
And I think that part of the reason why Black and brown trans women, but Black and brown women and Black and brown women and queer women in general, but specifically trans women, one of the reasons why I think they led a lot of the movements and have led a lot of the movements over the years also goes back to, when you think of like the era of Stonewall, like 1969, New York City, these bars would get raided. And if you were like one of my friends was in Stonewall the night of the riot, he ended up being able to leave the bar when it got raided because he was there with a Catholic priest. And it was more embarrassing to the police and to New York City to have a priest arrested at a gay bar. So they're going to just like shuffle him and, the white gay man that he was with out of the bar before they do the arrests. because that's how they, they're gonna, and that's what would happen on a regular basis. Like if you were there with certain people, if there was like heaven forbid, someone like from the elected office or something with you, like you would be able to get out of the room in ways that a lot of people, but Black and brown women, and particularly trans women, like they did not have that ability to get out of that room. So they had to put their bodies on the line. They had to, they were always the ones that were arrested first. They were, people like Stormy Delaverre, I always mispronounce her last name, who was a biracial lesbian woman who dressed as a man and performed as a drag king in places like the Stonewall. She was always the first person the police targeted when they would go in the bar, because she was a masculine appearing biracial woman who was a lesbian. It was like the pinnacle of the worst thing you could be to these cops, right? And so when you think of like people like Miss Major and Sylvia Rivera and all these other trans women in New York City specifically, they led Pride, they led these movements because they had no other choice. So yes, we owe them as a community great, but also we also have to understand that like we created a community in which their only option was to put their life on the altar, right? Like, and that's something like we need to own as a community. And as we continue to fight for equity, equality, and all of the other things that we need for our civil liberties, we always have to keep that in mind, that at the end of the day, like even within our beautiful rainbow family, there's level of privileges, there's ways that certain groups of people get access to certain things in ways that are different than others. It doesn't mean somebody is better or worse than somebody else, or that somebody should feel guilty that they get access to certain spaces in ways that the other people can't. Like I always say, at my job as someone at the Pride Center who's like a cisgendered man who like, I can't pass as straight, but like I can still walk in a straight space very easily, more or less. And I can walk in an affluent place because I have enough of an education that I can speak eloquently with rich white people and like be in those spaces. And so it's my job as someone who can be in those spaces to open a door and then keep it held open for everybody else that's behind me, right? And like, I think that's something that as a movement, we need to be better about recognizing like our own privileges that we all walk with within the community, and understand that there's always going to be people that do not have access to rights, privileges, and whatnot that we might have, even though we as a community are collectively being oppressed. There's still micro oppressions happening within the community. We have to be conscious of that. And that's how we really start to smash the patriarchy, defeat white supremacy, and really break down these like systematic oppressions that have been foisted on us as a community, even though we didn't want it.
Yeah. Taylor, I want to ask about the beer, because I'm someone who also really enjoys beer. But before I do that, I want to set a baseline for folks maybe who are listening who just haven't thought about brewing as a male-dominated industry, which it is. I don't have facts and figures in front of me, but I'm sure, like, I have no doubt that if I pulled data right now, the data would appreciate me saying that. So I'm wondering if you can set a baseline, because in addition to, there's sort of like the Bud Light model where it's like some gorgeous size 000 person, I have no resentment, holding this like sweaty, attractive cold can of Bud Light. Or there's like the dude in flannel with the big Adirondack chair and a glassy lake in front of him. And it's like a very aspirational lifestyle. And there isn't that much room for women, non-binary folk, and also for, talking about people of color. There is not that much room for Black and brown brewers, even though we're starting to see that change very slowly in the state. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you're seeing and then how Alvarium is pushing back against that.
So Alvarium is located in New Britain. We have a very diverse city, very similar to New Haven. We have a great, like, eclectic mix of people who come in. I would say, like, our clientele is much more diverse than a lot of other breweries, like, even around the state. But we've always seen this. I've been in the beer industry for 3 years and the food and beverage industry for longer than that. But we always see this, like, kind of comment like, other people of color aren't interested in this topic. That's why there's no Black and brown brewers or anybody in the gay community. They're just not interested. So I don't think that the way that the beer industry presents itself makes anybody want to be interested. I mean, like, if we look at all of like the commercials, if we look at just like, you know, you walk into a brewery in any town in Connecticut and you see all the people, you're like, damn, this doesn't doesn't really look like, sorry, FCC, doesn't look like somewhere that they belong or they feel like welcome. And I just think that in every space, we see these kind of microaggressions. We see it with housing, we see it with food and bev, we see it definitely with the brewing industry. All of these little pieces are pieces that we need to get rid of before we can fix anything. So I've been working really, really hard to make sure that people know that Alvarium specifically is a place where we don't tolerate any hate speech from our customers. The reason that I reached out for the collab actually was because a couple weeks ago, or before I reached out, I had somebody come up to me and they were like, hey, I have a question about the bar. And I'm like, okay, what's up? And they're like, when did this become a gay bar? And I was like, you gotta go. And that was like it. I was like, okay, if somebody is mad that there are gay people in this space, I want to make them so uncomfortable that they don't come back ever again. You know what I mean? Like, that's like, it's so hard to, you know, you obviously you want to have everybody have a good time, but when there's people that are sitting there kind of targeting like one group of people, you're just like, damn, really hard. And so we've really tried to make it a zero tolerance place with these collabs too, just so we know like our culture as a company is very accepting, very like embracing.
Yes. Also, I will say with the really sad death of gay bars across the country, those affinity spaces are still really, really important. So just shouting that out because it's a really sad trend. I'm very proud of the fact that we have 3 gay bars in New Haven, all of which I think are reopened. Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong.
And I'm just gonna put it out there. The bars are having a resurgence. Like, if this is the one good thing that comes out of COVID, I mean, you go to any of these spaces and they're like super busy and people are coming back, and people who haven't been to these spaces for years are coming back. It's actually been really cool seeing them reopen and people really like wanting to be in there.
So I want to ask about the beer itself, Taylor. When Alvarium was thinking, okay, what are the ingredients? So obviously love and acceptance, but what are the actual ingredients that go into craft beer like Be Fierce?
So Be Fierce, we used our base sour recipe. We do a ton of different sour beers. A lot of the times when you make a sour beer, you can use different types of yeast to sour it. You can use Greek yogurt even to sour different types of beers. But with this one, we used our base and then we were like, okay, what do we want the beer to taste like? So we were kind of going back and forth. We talked to the Pride Center. We're like, okay, what's a flavor that you really, really want to see in this? And we had, one person say like, oh, I really love blood orange. I'm like, okay, I can work with that. Like, we'll figure out some way to incorporate blood orange. And then I had the idea to make it a cosmopolitan style sour. So I was like, the Cosmo is so applicable, I feel like, in this particular instance.
You say it, Taylor, it's so gay.
It's so gay and it's awesome. So we did that, except, we swapped the orange for blood orange. And we just wanted to make something that was like light and fruity and really fun. And like, you can pour it over ice if you want to. You can drink it from a can, just kind of like all across the board, just fun. So we did that. We used real cranberries. I was emulsion blending cranberries in a bucket and then dumping them into the tank, using orange puree and lime puree in kind of these like very concentrated amounts to try to get that fruit flavor. The cranberries gave it that like nice tartness, but we sweetened it up a little bit. So it was a lot that went into it, a lot of fruit. But that's what we wanted. So.
And
on the day we brewed, Lucy, I actually hand squeezed everything for the taste tester.
He did a great job.
My grandmother taught me well how to use that juicer.
Yep.
Well, and so Taylor, I want to ask you this. Although Patrick and JC, you're welcome to answer too. I hate it when people say to me, especially if it's something that I'm drinking, when people say like, "Oh, that's such a girly beer," right? And usually my answer is like, "What the flippity flip is a girly beer?"
Yeah.
So
a Guinness, clearly.
You know, and so have there also been conversations around, you know, this is a beer for everyone. I will say sours are having a renaissance, which is a great thing. They're also, I've been told that like of beers, if you're gonna drink a beer, they have good bacteria for your tummy. And so yeah, but you know, what is your reaction when you're talking to folks about, hey, like, and if you don't like it, just don't drink it.
Yeah, we have a lot of that. So it's kind of weird because we have all these different styles of beer and we have two styles of glasses. So either get your beer in like your pint, which is, you know, your regular beer glass. It's like a little curved because of the way that we need it for our beer. But we also have a tulip, which has a stem, which I've had so many big macho men come in and be like, I don't want that. I don't want it in that glass. It's like, what? Like, it's gay to drink out of a glass with a stem? You're telling me that that's what you're afraid of. Somebody's going to walk in and watch you hold this little glass with a stem. So that's fun. That's always like something that we get all the time. And it's just weird. And that's why I wanted this beer to be so pink. And with the label, I wanted it to be like, yeah, you have to walk out of this beer or this brewery with a beer with a drag queen on it. So if you like this beer, you got to walk around, show everybody that you like this beer, that you support drag queens. And so that was why it was really important to have all of those things go into this, because when you're looking at it on the screen, you can't really tell what what it looks like unless you've seen it on social media or whatever. So when they order it and they get it, I want people to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm drinking this like very light, very pink, very fruity beer, which a lot of people say like, guys won't order it and stuff, but like, they love this. They love it. And that's why when, with the label, I just wanted it to be so in your face, like just breaking down all of these really bad stereotypes around beer.
Yeah, because also I will say when it's 95 degrees, no one wants to drink a porter. No one. Like if you are getting a dark foamy chocolate beer, you don't want that. Or even like a heavy IPA. So
yeah. I'm not an IPA drinker. So
yeah.
To me, like I really, really wanted to push it for something weird. Something that was just not an IPA, because I think that IPA thing really feeds into like the bro culture of beer. So sours have kind of like opened up a lot of people to beer because it's not that like traditional bitter flavor, even that you see with like a lot of stouts and porters. So sours have been kind of like not only just a renaissance in beer, but also a renaissance in beer drinkers too.
Yeah.
It got me. I like beer in very specific environments. Usually pizza is involved, and I might have just moved someone into an apartment. But so I have very specific, but I really enjoy, particularly on a hot day, a sour. I mean, Kyle and I went through RB Fierce beer in like 24 hours. I mean, we were having a heat wave. But still, like it's a really, and like for me, I'm a cocktail person, and for me, the Be Fierce, it's like having a cocktail. It's like having a cocktail that's a little bit fizzy and maybe makes me feel a little fuller than a normal cocktail does. But like, I don't know. I also have kind of slightly fallen in love with the beers at Avarium. They have this one that we're not, is not what we're talking about, but I'm gonna talk about it because I like it. It's like, it tastes like cheesecake, and like super lime cheesecake, and then it has a graham cracker finish, and it's like every time you have a can, it's like, oh my god, I just ate an entire thing of cheesecake, but I didn't have to have the calories. It's amazing.
I wouldn't say that. Be careful with those. Those have a lot of calories in them.
Well, I mean, you did put actual cream cheese into the
yeah. We do a sour beer with cream cheese, graham cracker, and whatever kind of like pie filling that we use. So we've done blueberry, peach, apple, like cranberry, lemon, and our new one is lime. So we have fun with these things. We want to kind of break down this like beer is boring thing. So we just try to do a lot of different fun stuff.
Well, and Taylor, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the broy culture around IPAs, because I guess like in some ways I had not thought about that specifically, but you're totally right. And when I think of the spaces I've been in where I'm watching people either consume or brew IPAs, it's always been it's always been like white dudes, usually wearing flannels, sometimes wearing overalls, but like not cute overalls.
Yeah.
I have the overalls from when I was working in the brew house for a long time. It's hard not to subscribe to a culture like that when you're like endoused in it. But so it's just, I don't know, it's something that you see a lot at breweries. You see the guys come up in like their little, you know, cohorts, and they're like, yeah, let me get the strongest IPA you have. And it's like, whoa, take a step back. What do you need? And we do love that. I think it's not something that will ever go away in the brewing industry, but we want to make sure that there's other things going on too, you know.
JC, are you also a beer drinker? Like, have you?
I am not a beer drinker, but be fierce. It is the most delicious thing I have ever tasted. It literally saved my life these last few days where it was like a gazillion degrees. And I thought I was gonna like burst into flames from how hot I was. It sort of became a ritual to like get home drenched in sweat and instantly run to my refrigerator, pop a beef ears, sit down with my beer, and draw. So all of the new drawings that you've been seeing at in my social media have been inspired by my drinking of beef ears. So not only is it delicious and cools you down, but it also makes you a really good artist. So get one. Because I don't know what
it taught me how to sew all those costumes for Sunday's show. I was like literally downing beef ears at 4 a.m. as I'm like,
I don't know what they put in it, but somehow when you drink it, you become an artist.
True.
So I will say, Jason, you've been drawing the cast from Pose.
Yes.
Yeah. And for folks who don't know what Pose is, one, you should go watch every episode, even though it is not a complete catalog of ballroom and what happened in the 1980s. So please don't take it at that. I'm wondering if either you or Patrick can do a better job of just really quickly giving people like the 30-second, here's what Pose is, to talk about why you were inspired to draw these characters.
Yeah, so Pose is a sort of, it's a very small section of the ball scene. So the ball scene in the 80s and 90s was very important to Black and Brown people because there was all these like beauty pageants in the queer community, specifically for either trans women or drag queens. And Crystal LaVeja, a Black trans woman, really experienced a lot of racism. And she sort of decided to like break out of this and create her own little piece of space and where Black and Brown folks could be themselves, and they would, you know, sort of walk the runway in ways that they sort of dreamed of to be perceived, right? There's categories like, you know, executive realness. So it was sort of these exaggerations and almost caricatures of the things that they wanted to be a part of, but were often sort of pushed out and told you weren't good enough. You were either too Black, too brown, too gay to be part of this. And it was really a way for folks to express themselves, to show full authentic themselves, to celebrate art, to celebrate creativeness. And there's way so much more, but that's a 30-second view of it. And Pose is this great show that does a fairly decent job at sort of exploring what that means for people and what that time meant, and gives us a snapshot, a small snapshot of what that time was like for the queer community, and it sort of really focuses on Black and Brown folks. For me, it's really amazing because I've always loved the ball scene. Like, I think it's this beautiful sort of amazing, I would venture to say renaissance of non-traditional queer art, right? Like when we think about art, we think about drawings, we think about paintings, we think about things that we can put in a museum, but we often sort of dismiss drag queens and folks who dance in terms of like voguing and things like that. Like, that to people is not art, right? That's just queer people being queer, right? And for me, I just get so inspired by by those folks. And I've been watching the show. I've been binging it. This is my second time watching it. And it's a very emotional show. I think it's even extra emotional if you happen to be Black or brown, because you see yourself reflected in such an amazing way that you often don't see yourself reflected in TV shows. And I think drawing them in the way that I see them, as sort of taking a little piece of like the saint sort of paintings that you often see people draw. I did like little halos on all of them and sort of very ethereal. Just because to me, they are my saints, right? Like they are the folks who inspire me every day. They are the folks who not necessarily the characters, but those archetypes are the folks who pave the way for me to be able to work at the Pride Center, for me to be able to have this amazing opportunity provided by Taylor and the team to design a label for a beer and not have to bend myself to these rules of like, I have to make this label something that straight dudes and bros are going to want. No, I'm going to design and be fierce and draw this label that, regardless where you are in the spectrum of heterosexuality or cisgenderness, you are going to have fun and enjoy this beer, and it's going to be refreshing, and it's going to cool you off. It's going to taste delicious, and it's going to make you into an artist, because I'm pretty convinced that they put something in there that makes you into an artist.
Well, and Lucy, I'm going to add one thing to what JC said, is that ballroom culture literally is what popular modern day culture is. Like almost everything that you can attune to modern day culture has roots somehow connected to ballroom. And just as simple, I mean, like, I don't know if folks have seen some of the controversy with Madonna over the last few days, where she like made this big deal about how she did a girl on girl kiss and blah, blah, blah before a Black person, blah, 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 blah. But it's like, girl, you stole voguing literally from Black queer people and then made a song about it and then hired them all. And then when they got HIV, you fired them. Like, that's like literally the chain of events that happened. And so like, there's so much of ballroom culture. I mean, literally anything that comes out of RuPaul's mouth is from every single line, catchphrase, and line that is said in RuPaul's Drag Race has roots in ballroom. It was either said in the ballroom clubs, or it's from like things like Paris is Burning, which was a documentary done about the Black and brown communities and the ballroom scene of New York City. And so like, there's so much about modern day culture that like is rooted directly in ballroom culture, which is just another way that, you know, many communities, not just one, but many communities have stolen from Black and brown queer people and the art of Black and brown queer people.
Yeah, and I want to say, just before we go any further, that if folks already or have not already listened to it, Crystal LaBeja's read of Rachel Harlow from the 1968 documentary film The Queen is one of my favorite things. The line, I'm going to mess it up. It's like, she is by far the ugliest person in this room. One of my favorite lines. Like, I will just think it to myself when I'm sad, and it will make me happy. But I want to remind listeners that if you're just joining us, or if you've been with us for the last 40 minutes, this is Arts Respond on WNHH Community Radio 103.5 FM New Haven. I'm Lucy Gellman, and I'm here today with Patrick Dunn and Juan Carlos Soto of the New Haven Pride Center, and Taylor Willett of Alvarium Brewing Company. I got it right this time. So Taylor, I want to ask you, although I want to ask everyone, we're at this point in our country where I feel like among a lot of folks, including a lot of white women, like Joe Biden sort of got elected and people like went to sleep a little bit. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how you are using Be Fierce and the Alvarium brand to, you know, as a launch pad into conversations about the fact that like there are things happening in this country, including homophobia, including rampant transphobia in state legislatures. And, you know, and folks are sleeping on it. So maybe to not have folks sleep on it.
Yeah, and it is important, I think, in all of these communities, like the beer community, just to raise awareness of what's really going on. And you know, in my personal life, I try to do a ton of work donating and educating people. And I have a master's in cultural geography. So I kind of did that like to make sure that I was helping to educate other people, because, I was lucky enough to be able to go to college and have those resources. And so it was kind of good that I was, on the team, and I dedicate a lot of the work that I do with Alvarium to making people aware of situations. I'm kind of like the person that people will ask about stuff like that. So it's kind of fun to have somebody like that on a team. And I think that not just that every team needs somebody like that, but everybody should be like that. You know what I mean? So it's important to us and to me.
Yeah, I think, I think one of the, in my interactions with Alvarium that I've done, I think one of the cool, really awesome things that I appreciate about them, it's just a willingness to be like just authentic and just be themselves. And like sometimes that can be such a radical thing, right? In this world. And just like the love that they have, and the love and passion that they have for their art of brewing translates into everything they do. And I think, to answer your question, I think like that's what sort of keeps us actually like not to fall asleep, right? It's like when you love your community, when you pour the love that like you have into your community, you realize that there's things that are messed up, right? You realize that regardless of who is in office, like we always need to be vigilant, and we always need to push that needle, and we always have to like get stuff done, right? So I think like that's something that we lost a little bit in terms of like a country and just as a regular people. It's that when Trump was in office, a lot of the love that people were sort of expressing to each other was sort of a little bit selfish. It was a little internalized, like, oh, I'm getting attacked now, so now I understand like why this is a thing, right? And then like when when Biden went into office, it was like, oh, like I don't know, I don't need to love my community as much because like he's got it. Like he's gonna love you for me, or he's gonna love you in place of me. And I think like that's a cool thing about just sort of trying to connect it to this project. It's like that's a really cool thing about this project, right? There was so much love in the way that Taylor and team like were like talking to us about the flavor and the colors on the label, and yeah, like it just, I don't know. This project was super cool. So I just kind of like want to throw a lot of flowers to Taylor and team, because it is something that I've wanted to do for a long time as an artist, and it means so much to me to not only be able to have my dream happen, but also while having my dream happen, be able to honor my queer ancestors in such a radical and amazing way, right? And again, going back to the beginning, like this shouldn't be radical, but for some really weird reason it is.
We'll change it.
Even with Joe Biden in office, right? Even with Joe Biden in office, this feels so radical and it's so bananas, but the world.
Oh, sorry. I did want to say, Taylor, I know you have to hop off for work, and I want to thank you so much for joining us. And I also want people to know where they can buy Be Fierce, because we will plug it, and where they can buy the super dope shirt that Patrick's wearing, which is gorgeous.
And get the beer at Alvarium. It's 365 John Downey Drive, New Britain. We have t-shirts, we have beer. You guys can buy everything online and then pick it up in the brewery. We are also working to try to get Be Fierce in partners in New Haven. Patrick and I are working very diligently on getting that project all set. So it should be a good time. We will probably have it all weekend into next week, but it is going fast. So come and get it. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, and I want to give a big shout out to Dickie, who could be
please.
Dickie.
I know he's not
here.
Dickie.
Yeah, shout out to the brewer.
Yeah, for those who are watching, Dickie is now your new head brewer, as of like a week ago. But Dickie was amazing, and he like literally let Laura and I like do almost everything. Like I got to put the hops in. Laura and I like cleaned one of the machines out. Like
They did a great job. All right, guys, I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you so
Taylor.
much, Taylor.
Bye, guys. I'll see you soon.
Patrick and JC. So JC, you already answered part of this, but you know, looking at where we're at this moment in the country, but also like New Haven is having a moment or many moments.
A lot of moments.
Yeah. So how are you
feelings.
using a lot of feelings? Yeah. June. I guess we're not in June anymore. June was a lot. Pride Month was a lot on I would say a 16-month period that has also been a lot. On top of like 401 years that have also been a lot. But you know, I'm wondering for both of you who have these conversations every day, how something like this can be a launchpad, and of course, if there are straight allies listening, how they can use this beautiful beer, or just the fact that they genuinely care about being allies, to say, hey, don't sleep on what's going on.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like what Taylor was talking about earlier about like that whole like story that she shared with the men, like the straight guys like not dude bros not wanting to drink from like the glass with a stem. It's like just buying a beer and like helping break these weird stereotypes and weird sort of shame thoughts that we have about men wearing pink or straight cis men like drinking a sour ale. Like all of these things like are helpful, because you know, part of when we talk about like things like racism and anti-womanness, misogyny, and all these things, like it's not enough just to say I'm not a racist or I'm not a misogynist, like, right? Like we have to break these down, and you have to take action and do things that are not only breaking it in the outside world, but also sort of undoing it within your own self. Like, it's like, it's not enough to be not racist. You have to be anti-racist, right? So it's not enough to not be homophobic. You have to be anti-homophobic as well, just to kind of steal a little bit of that. And I think like, if you're an ally, like not only are you having a delicious beer, but like you're taking this radical stance against all of these like internalized homophobia, and you're supporting a center like us. We're a small center, and like we love to say like we turn $1 into $3. And you know, you're taking action to support us as well, and our community, and the work that we do, which we love to do so much. But you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I always quote Allah. For those who don't know, Allah is the center's youth program manager. She's also one of the founders of Black Lives Matter New Haven. You know, she always says like, I don't need an ally. What I need is a comrade. I need someone who will like get in the trenches with me. And like, I think just kind of piggyback off of what JC said, you know, being a victim of bias does not exclude you from bias. And we all collectively have to continue to work together and work on ourselves, and not just hold other people accountable, but hold ourselves accountable. I mean, there are plenty of times that like I'll say or do something and I'll think about it, and then I'll usually go to JC and be like, did I just be problematic? You know, or, you know, and that's like a reality, right? Like I can experience all the discrimination in the world. It doesn't exclude me from then turning around and applying that discrimination to somebody else to make myself feel better subconsciously, not even like on purpose. And so I think for me, when I think about like, what can a straight ally do? What can someone who's straight do to be more conscious, to be more good, whatever, you know, whatever word you want to use. I think it's about like really not just being like, okay, I'm not going to be homophobic, I'm not going to be biphobic, I'm not going to be transphobic, I'm not going to be queerphobic, but it's about like embracing the queer without trying to make the queer your own. You know what I mean? It's like this, and then listen, it is a very hard balance, right? Like, but like resist the urge to make the queer culture your own, but find ways to support it by like going and buying a beer that is
Yes.
supporting the center, going to an art exhibit of a queer artist that you're not sure if you're going to like the art or not, but hey, you know, going to a drag show and giving a drag queen $1. Like, these are all ways that you can really invest in the community and not just support the community.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank both of you so much. We will share with this episode the website for the New Haven Pride Center and for Alvarian Brewing Company. If you like what you hear, I'm paraphrasing Kiki Lucia and not doing a good job. But if you like what you hear, maybe, you know, and you're feeling generous, kick some dollars toward the Pride Center, kick some dollars toward what sounds like a delicious beer. I'm going to have to get my butt to New London and pick some up. New Britain. There are too many news in Connecticut.
Well, the good news is New Britain is closer than New London.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I'm going to have to get my butt to New Britain, pick up some of this beer. And I hope both of you have a beautiful weekend. And thank you to Taylor Willett, who had to go for work, but was just absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, Lucy,
Thank
for always
you.
being a comrade in the trenches with us.
I'm trying.
Thank you.
Never go down.
Hi, this is Bella,
Night in the sky.
and you are listening.
Yeah.
W N 8 L P 1 O 3.5 F M New Haven Streaming Live at www.newhaven.com